Of Blood and Steel, written by Seymour Zainali, narrated by James Lawrence. Chapter 21. Old Wounds, New Beginnings. Balak and Arda sat by a campfire. Arda had started it, and Balak had built it up while listening to her story. She wailed for the child, and she seemed unconcerned with her own injuries.
"How does he know your name? Who is Karnak, and why is he determined to kill you?"
Arda asked.
"After I escaped slavery, I made a promise to my mother to one day return and free her and kill the man who wronged us. I found a sword that promised to lead me to him. I took it, and with it the name, the Terror of Tartaurus. When I arrived at his home, I found his grown son and his family. After he fed me, he promised to take me to his father, only the man was already dead. All that remained was his father's grave. He explained that my mother was burned with the rest of the slaves. I was so distraught, and I lost control."
"Balak, what did you do?"
Arda asked, afraid of hearing the answer she already knew. The images of that night flashed in Balak's mind. The voices of the family echoed in his head. The feeling of the blood warmed his skin, and the smell of the burnt flesh filled his senses. Balak could no longer hold back the tears. He didn't want Arda to notice and kept his head low. That was when he felt a warm hug on his left. He hugged Arda back and cried like a child in the embrace of his mother.
"You said you found a sword?"
"More like it found me," Balak began. "I could hear it speak in my head, promising to make me strong enough and help me find the man. It craved blood and grew in strength with every slaying, feeding on the blood of my enemies."
"Is that why you hate magic?"
"It brings out the worst in you, and now it has a new master."
"The Dark Blade. I've heard stories about it. You think Karnak has the sword?"
"I knew it looked familiar the moment I saw it. He must have picked it up in the same night I left it. If I get the chance to separate him from the sword, he might listen."
"And what if magic has nothing to do with it?"
"That's what I fear the most, that it wasn't the sword, but my own anger. I'll face Karnak and bring the child back."
"I will help you. I don't want to lose you and will be at your side."
Balak turned to Arda and held her shoulders.
"This is personal, Arda. I must face him alone."
At first light, the two set off to the hill by the Crimson Point. Arda climbed with Balak to the top of the hill.
"Are you sure about this?"
she asked him. Balak half smiled at his friend. They headed up the hill. It was a blustery day, and Karnak was waiting for them at the top. They approached him. The basket with the baby was an equal distance between them. Arda rushed to pick the child up and swiftly returned to Balak. They exchanged glances as Balak took a deep breath and stepped toward Karnak. He stood there like a mountain, but Balak knew he was like a volcano, waiting to burst.
"I know how you feel. You are—"
he began.
"Stop!"
Karnak interrupted.
"You don't get to speak. You don't get to make speeches. I have waited for this moment all my life. I have dedicated my life to finding the man who wronged me, and watching you take your last breath will finally end my suffering. A man who slaughtered an innocent family will get what he deserves. Steal. And what of the lives you have taken? You are guilty in their eyes, as I am in yours. Admittedly, I've killed countless men just to get to you, Balak, but their blood is on your hands. All of this is the result of your wrongdoing. You started it, and I am here to put it to an end. This is what justice looks like." "It stopped being justice a long time ago. You're here to get revenge. We have spilled enough blood between us. It's time to put the past to rest. Leave, and have the life your parents wanted you to have. You think I would just walk away after I invested so much of my life to it? Pretend like the last couple of decades never happened? How dare you even ask a man something like this, to put it all behind me, to forget what you did to me?
No, I'm not asking you to forget, but to forgive.
Forgive? So you can save your lousy life?
Not mine, yours.
There was a brief silence, then Karnak unleashed a furious laugh.
I think your mind is withering with your age, he said.
Balak ignored the comment and continued.
I have seen the end of the path you are on. I don't wish you to suffer the same fate. I really wish things were different.
Me too. I wish you were fucking dead.
Karnak took a moment to compose himself before continuing.
And I am here to make sure of that.
He charged at Balak with all his speed. He struck with his sword, but Balak blocked with his axe.
Vengeance is not the answer. Take it from someone who knows.
I do not need your counsel, just your head.
He swung at Balak again. He was in a frenzied rage, swiping his sword in every direction. He swung in a downward motion, and Balak stepped back. He probably could have taken his head, but instead he sliced at Karnak's hand and tried to disarm him. Karnak stepped forward and punched Balak hard in the face. He spun and kicked him, throwing Balak backwards.
Revenge will not change the past, nor will it give the future you seek. Take it from someone who walked the same path,
Balak implored. Balak purposely aimed at Karnak's left shoulder in hopes of damaging his dominant hand. He repeatedly made small cuts, planning to get Karnak to drop the weapon. For what seemed like hours, Balak was cautious to avoid Karnak's attacks. Both men grew tired. Karnak was younger and had a lot of strength. Finally, though, the sword grew too heavy for the young man's wounded arm. He dropped it and fell to his knees to catch his breath. He looked at Balak with boiling rage, spittle flying from his mouth.
Go ahead, kill me, just like you killed my parents.
No,
Balak dropped his axe.
I will not kill you.
Pick that up and fight,
Karnak roared. He was livid. When Balak did not do as he was asked, Karnak yelled,
Fine!
Then he jumped on Balak and started punching him in the face and ribs. Balak's wounds split open, but Karnak kept on beating down on him. Balak saw Arda. She was fighting the urge to rush to his aid. Balak slowly raised his hand and stopped Arda from intervening. Karnak thumped Balak in the ribs and penetrated his vital organs. Balak gasped. He turned pale and started to breathe heavily. His wounds were spilling blood, and he lay still. Karnak buried his head in his hands. His eyes filled with tears, but he kept on beating Balak. He beat him until Balak's face was fully covered in blood.
I hate you! I hate you!
He screamed at Balak's bloodied face. His arms kept beating on Balak, but each hit grew weaker and weaker until he stopped. He fell on the ground in the fetal position and wept. He let out a loud, excruciating cry that he had held on to for years. Even Karnak felt his throat hurt from the scream, until he stopped. At that moment, a flash of realization came across Karnak's face. He slowly got up, looked at Arda with the child, then at Balak. He spat on Balak before uttering,
Only because I forgive you doesn't mean I have to like you,
Karnak told him. He grabbed the sword and walked away, leaving bloody footsteps behind. He swung the sword and threw it off the cliff's edge before disappearing out of sight. Just after Karnak left, Arda rushed to Balak's side with the child.
Balak, oh no, let me help you.
She tried to stop the bleeding with her hands, but
There were too many wounds. "It's no good," she said as the blood gushed from his injuries. "I can heal you." She reached for her staff, but Balak grabbed her hand.
"No, Arda, you must go. Alone," Balak croaked. "My time has come. It's time for me to go."
"No, Balak, we can still make it. Together."
"No, Arda, just you. It was never my journey to finish."
Arda put her head on Balak, and he held her for a moment. But I can heal you. You don't have to die." She whispered the words, fighting the urge to cry.
"I know you can, but I don't want you to. I'm ready to go. I kept my promise. You're safe now."
"Balak, I'm sorry."
"Don't be. I am going to see my parents again."
Balak looked into the distance and half smiled. Arda followed his eyes to see what he was looking at, but there was nothing there. The child started crying again, and it startled Balak.
"Take good care of her,"
he said, and at that his breathing slowed. Arda couldn't hold her tears in any longer, and they started to roll down her face. With that, Balak slipped away. After grieving for a while, Arda vanished into the distance with the child.